Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. What do you get when Russia's war machine runs low on men, money, and credibility? Apparently, recruitment flyers quietly taped to lampposts in Tehran promising cash, comfort, and a one-way ticket to the Ukrainian front. Moscow is allegedly trying to hire Iranians for a war it still pretends is going according to plan. That's why on this episode, we look at the mysterious posters in Tehran, the handshakes between the leaders, as well as the military cooperation that changed the battlefield itself, the Shahed drones. Without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
The short conflict between Iran and Israel has affected Iran's infrastructure in more ways than one. A particularly concerning area, according to reports, are Iranian nuclear sites, which were bombed in a US airstrike in June. Iranian authorities have not given the International Atomic Energy Agency access to the sites. The IAEA wants to clarify the status of Iran's enriched uranium stockpiles and safeguarded nuclear facilities, but Tehran is not willing to cooperate. Instead, the side it has been willing to work with is Russia.
We are in close contact on all key international issues, including all matters related to the Iranian nuclear program. You know our position. We support Iran at the UN.
But this cooperation isn't as perfect as both sides openly tout. Although Russia has promised much in terms of supporting Iran's nuclear ambitions, it hasn't actually delivered on anything other than one nuclear power plant operating in Bushehr. All the while, Iran is struggling under the reimposed UN sanctions.
And now, let's zone in on the east-planning portion of our show. Ever since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Moscow has been tightening its ties with Iran. While both parties openly tout their alliances as something unbreakable, this partnership is far from the perfect marriage that either would have us believe.
Many in Iran are beginning to view Russia as unreliable. The two countries have very deep ties which affect almost every important sector, from the military to energy and nuclear cooperation. The public, academia, and even some Iranian officials see Moscow as dismissive of Iran and an incredibly self-centered ally. There are even opinions that Russia is merely using Iran as leverage in its negotiations with the United States. There are also more concrete complaints that some in Iran have been raising, namely, that Russia hasn't been fulfilling its obligations as an ally. While Iran has been heavily supported in Russia's war effort in Ukraine by supplying its military with hundreds of drones and other equipment, promised fighter jets and other aerial defense systems are yet to be delivered into Tehran's hands. The latter is particularly concerning for the Iranian regime, as its recent conflict with Israel stripped bare the vulnerability of Iranian territory to aerial attacks. Despite these setbacks in bilateral relations, Iran's more conservative political circles continue to push for further cooperation with the Russians.
And now, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Russia is definitely not running out of soldiers anytime soon. The conscription funnel is seemingly not drying up according to the payments out of the Russian state coffers. However, when a country has already emptied its prisons, drained its rural regions, leaned on North Korean manpower, and quietly scooped up recruits from Cuba to Nepal, what's left? Well, now it appears that the Kremlin has turned its eyes towards Iran, one of its newest but increasingly crucial wartime partners. Flyers have reportedly appeared across Tehran offering Iranian men lucrative contracts to join Russia's invasion force in Ukraine. The leaflets advertise signing bonuses of up to $20,000, a staggering amount in Iran's strained economy. On top of that, monthly salaries, free housing, medical care, flights to Russia, and even recruitment channels in multiple languages. While the Russian embassy denies everything, someone on a WhatsApp number listed in the flyer told Radio Free Europe's Radio Farda that the campaign is not only real but official, coordinated, and being run with Iran's knowledge. Russia has a well-documented history of relying on foreign fighters to plug its battlefield gaps. Thousands from Syria, Jordan, and the wider Middle East. Thousands from Central Asia. Cubans lured by promises of steady pay, North Koreans deployed under the guise of military cooperation. The Kremlin has quietly built a shadow system of outsourcing its casualties. And Tehran, with its deepening political and military ties to Moscow, offers fertile ground. So why Iran? The answer is painfully simple: economic desperation. Years of sanctions, mismanagement, and political isolation have left millions of Iranians struggling to survive. Against that backdrop, the promise of even $2,000 a month becomes a powerful lure, especially when it's being pitched to marginalized communities. Among them are Iran's Afghan refugees, millions of people living on society's edge, including former US-trained Afghan commandos who fled after the fall of Kabul. Some have previously admitted that they'd consider fighting for Russia as mercenaries. For Moscow, it's a reservoir of combat-experienced men who might take the risk if the alternative is poverty or deportation. Finally, there's the political backdrop. Iran and Russia, despite a long and complicated history, have drawn closer than ever in recent years. Tehran has supplied Moscow with attack drones, and Russia has helped Iran dodge aspects of Western pressure. Whether the flyers in Tehran are official, they reflect a reality Russia can hide. Its war machine is exhausted. In the end, this story is less about a handful of posters on the streets of Tehran and more about the global shadow army Russia is assembling to sustain an illegal invasion. A country that once claimed that it would take Kyiv in 3 days is now sourcing the world for replacements. But one thing is for sure, the Tehran-Moscow alliance has surely impacted the war in Ukraine. And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the stories from the East that you don't want to miss. Recent polls show that most Ukrainians support President Zelensky and are against holding wartime elections. This comes despite external pressure on Ukraine from its partners to hold elections.
Only 9% of Ukrainians support holding wartime elections even without an imposed ceasefire. A quarter would be in favor of such a vote if such a ceasefire backed by security guarantees was implemented. This shows that when it comes to the idea of wartime elections, the Ukrainian population has pretty much made its mind up. What's more, despite election pressure from both the United States administration and Russian claims of illegitimacy, support for Volodymyr Zelensky remains high despite recent controversies surrounding a corruption scandal. The president himself has said, however, that he would be ready to hold elections in 3 months if both the United States and the European Union could ensure their safety and security. Washington is yet to comment on this proposal.
Since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there has been a sharp rise in arrests in Poland over acts of espionage and sabotage. About 1 in 4 detained individuals are Belarusian nationals.
Recent reports indicate that Belarus is Russia's hand when it comes to acts of spying and diversion. Suspects, many of whom are Belarusian nationals, are often accused of gathering intelligence, planning acts of sabotage, spreading disinformation, and monitoring both military and infrastructure sites. Warsaw is very concerned about how close Belarusian and Russian intelligence have been cooperating when it comes to acts of espionage. Polish officials have said that these activities are part of a much broader hybrid warfare operation aimed at both destabilizing Poland and crippling support for Ukraine. This is not the first time that Belarus has engaged in hybrid activities against Poland. In the past, the Minsk regime orchestrated a migration crisis on the Polish-Belarusian border.
A trade war may be brewing between Georgia and Azerbaijan. The two South Caucasus nations are at odds over Azerbaijan's tight control over transit goods.
Relations between the South Caucasus nations have always been a fine line for their leaders to walk. The situation between Georgia and Azerbaijan is no different. Georgian businesses are warning that Azerbaijan is blocking or delaying exports, which in turn hurts the flow of trade through crucial transport corridors. Azerbaijan claims that these measures are necessary to prevent smuggling. Georgia, on the other hand, sees them as politically motivated. This dispute may have far-reaching consequences, as it could affect not just the two countries but the entire region and its connection to both Europe and Central Asia. Should the tensions escalate, the South Caucasus' reputation and potential as a transit hub could suffer long-lasting damage.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.